Hi, everyone. My name is Aziz, and I'm here to talk to you about neurofeedback. And the reason why I was invited to speak about neurofeedback is because I'm a founder of a company that works in that specific area. And the company is called MindLift. Uh, MindLift. It's here. I'm not sure you can see it well. It's a startup that is based in Tel Aviv and San Francisco. We're offering a home-based neurofeedback system, and I'll explain exactly what neurofeedback is. I assume that some of the people in the crowd are already familiar with neurofeedback. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to speak about MindLift specifically, but I'm rather cover this field of neurofeedback, what it is, what is the state of neurofeedback today, how does it work, and how can it be used for other purposes. Because I understood that part of the, one of the main reasons of this program is to educate people as much as possible about neurotechnology tools out there that can help you launching new wellness products. And neurofeedback can definitely be considered as a very useful tool. Okay. Oh, okay. Awesome. So, as with everything, I'm going to start with the brain. And what happens is that sometimes some brains are dysregulated. And what that means is that when the brain needs to be stimulated, it tends to be understimulated, and vice versa. So for example, people with ADHD, usually when they need to pay attention, what ends up happening is the exact opposite. Their mind wanders. And people with anxiety, for example, usually it's hard for them to stay calm, right? So the brain does not necessarily follow where it should be, and that causes this, or that is basically the dysregulation that I'm referring to. And when you look at the market and when you try to search for tools on how to cope with this dysregulation, usually medications are the most common option. But if you scan it even further, you would find that there are other alternatives to that, and one of them is called neurofeedback or EEG biofeedback. Now, I saw that there are some neuroscientists in the crowd, so I'm going to ask how many people are familiar with neurofeedback? Wow, quite a lot. Neurofeedback, not EEG. Neurofeedback? Awesome. EEG? Perfect. Okay, it makes my job much easier. Okay, so what exactly is neurofeedback? You see this weird image of someone with electrodes on their brain. So you can guess it has to do with putting things on your brain. And it starts with EEG, right? So what is EEG? EEG is basically the ability to measure the brain activity. And what it does, using sensors, it can measure electrical activity that is emitted as a result of the neuron's activity. And using EEG, we can actually measure quite a few things. Historically, EEG has been used to monitor sleep, has been used to detect seizures, and has been used in the medical field for multiple purposes. And what people figured out was that what can be measured can probably also be improved, right? And so when people started looking into EEG, and this is something that has been out there for more than 40, 50 years, well, the lighting is really bad. Yeah, can we turn off this light? Is it possible? Because the presentation is not showing well. No? You can see it? Okay, okay. All right. Let go. All right. So basically, you take the EEG, which is like you see raw signals from different parts of the brain. You can decompose that EEG. Perfect. All right. Okay. Yeah. And you can decompose it into different frequencies, different frequency bands. And each frequency band can tell us something else about the current mental state in the brain. Right? So if you, for example, take a look at high beta, which are usually like very, very fast frequencies in the brain, it can tell us about the current anxiety state of the person. Or for example, if we take a look at alpha, which are mid-range frequencies between 10 to 12 hertz or 8 to 12 hertz usually, it can tell us something about the current state of relaxation of that person. Whereas if we take a look, for example, at low beta, which is usually referred to as SMR, 12 to 15 hertz, it can tell us something about the current alertness of the person. So usually what research has shown, for example, that people with ADHD, they tend to have very high theta, which is an indication of mind wandering, higher than normal, I would say. And then they would also have lower SMR, lower ability to be alert, right? And that's something that has been existing in research for a while now. And then people figured, okay, if we can measure these things, can we improve them? Okay, can we actually use certain stimuli to change these patterns and therefore change behavior? And that's when neurofeedback got into the picture. So 30 years ago, people used neurofeedback to enhance relaxation and attention. And the way they've done it is they used EEG. So they placed EEG on the people's heads. This EEG measured their brain activity. And then specific frequencies, like what I've shown before, they targeted specific frequencies, like, for example, beta or theta, that are responsible for alertness and mind wandering. And they started showing visual or auditory feedback on the screen as a result. And what did that actually create is something that we call operant conditioning. Not sure, I missed a slide there. But anyway, what happens is, as I'm putting the EEG, as I have the EEG on, and as my brain activity is measured in real time, I am presented with visual feedback. So for example, let's take alpha. Okay, let's say we wanted to manipulate my alpha brain frequencies and to increase my relaxation, right? So what would happen is that whenever my alpha brain frequencies are above, the amplitude is above a certain threshold, so I'm reaching a certain mental state of relaxation, I see positive visual feedback on the screen. Just, assume I'm playing a game, and the game starts to run, or the character in the game starts to run faster when my alpha reaches that state that I want it to reach. Okay, and by I mean like the clinician, right? Because you have two parts here. You have the patient sitting with the EEG on, and you have the clinician sitting next to them, controlling the flow of the training. So let's say I wanted to improve my alpha. Whenever my alpha is above a certain threshold, then I see the game moving faster. It means whenever I'm relaxed above a certain state, I get positive reinforcement. And whenever I lose that state, my character starts to run slower. Okay, and that reminds you of something? It's classic conditioning, right? It's like the Pavlov experiment. And so what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to condition my alpha frequencies by presenting rewards or positive reinforcements whenever they are in a certain state, right? And so doing this over time, of course, it's not magic, right? It doesn't really happen overnight that you improve your relaxation. However, research has shown that if you do it for 25 to 30 sessions, you start to see significant improvement in your relaxed state, as well as you see your alpha brain frequencies change over time in the desired direction, of course. So what it essentially is basically taking dysregulated frequencies and regulating them by teaching the brain to self-regulate through positive reinforcement. It's very simple, yet the problem is that although it has been used by clinicians for the last 30 years in thousands and tens of thousands of clinics worldwide, and research, you have more than 400 papers published on neurofeedback showing its efficacy with ADHD, with anxiety, with even traumatic stress, post-traumatic stress disorder, and other brain disorders. It hasn't been very mainstream. And the reason is it's because it looks like this, right? So you have to go to the clinic. You have to put on these EEG electrodes, sit down while the clinician is actually monitoring your training, and you have to do that for 20 to 40 times throughout the therapy period, and it costs thousands of dollars. So it's very inaccessible and very it's not affordable, right? So although it works, although it has a lot of research on it, it's just never broke into the mainstream. However, something is changing, and it is the new consumer devices coming out to the market right now. So beforehand, in order to be able to measure someone's EEG, you had to use, wet electrodes that are connected to an amplifier, that are connected to a computer, and you had to use multiple electrodes, and you have to ask the people to come to the lab to do that, and these electrodes are not, along with the amplifier, these systems were not that accessible, unless you have an EEG lab. But now, starting in 2014, you saw more companies selling products that are basically very similar, or it's the same technology of the EEG used in the lab. However, it's done in a more accessible manner. So instead of, for example, putting on wet electrodes that require paste and so on, they use dry sensors, and these dry sensors can measure your EEG the same way that wet electrodes do. However, with less quality, you have to know that, but it's good enough for multiple things, and I'll get to that in a second. So yeah, since 2014 until now, the market has been flooded with devices like these, and that's great. That's only great because it makes developing neurotechnology products more accessible. The current state of neurofeedback is now, if you search the market, you can see products using neurofeedback for sleep enhancement. So there are like two purposes, right? You have the clinical purposes and you have the non-clinical purposes of using EEG and neurofeedback. So on the clinical side, obviously you have neurotherapy, right? So neurofeedback can be used to actually improve specific symptoms of specific brain disorders. You have it on the brain assessment side as well. So how can we use EEG to detect, for example, cognitive decline, or to detect a certain brain disorder, and multiple other purposes on the clinical side. And on the non-clinical side, people have been using neurofeedback to manage stress, right? So for example, this headset that I've shown before, is anyone familiar with this one? Okay, awesome. So these guys, what they've done, they've released this product to the market in order to help people do meditation, or better meditation. The way it works is very simple. A lot of people have a very hard time meditating, especially beginners, because it can be irritating to just sit down and try to think about nothing for prolonged periods, and you don't know how well you're doing when you're doing that. So what these guys have done, they said, okay, awesome. A lot of people are getting into the hype of meditation, and there's a lot of hype around it, and it's a big market. So let's just help those who have a hard time starting get started by having them put this wearable device on that measures their EEG, and while they're doing the meditation, they can listen to sounds that tell them how well they're doing. So for example, when they are in the relaxed state that they need to be in, they will listen to the sounds of birds and rivers and nice things. And whenever they lose that state, they start to listen to like winds and crappy stuff, basically, right? So it's the same concept of neurofeedback. It's just positive reinforcement whenever you want the person to be in the right state. And it's working really well with them, for these guys. But unintentionally, what they've also done, they've spurred the development of other neurofeedback applications, because other developers thought, okay, great. Maybe now I can use this device in the market to develop my own neurofeedback application without the need to manufacture my own device. And that's actually one of the things that we do. So they've had a real impact on the EEG market, and a lot of credit goes to these guys. They're called Muse. Some people by the way, some people I'm sure in the crowd, especially the neuroscientists, those who work with EEG, might have some strong opinions about the quality of the sensors. But I'm happy to discuss that after my lecture, and how can the quality be modulated? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So I know I don't have much time left, so I'm just tell you a little bit about what we've done. We basically focused on the clinical side in the beginning, because oh yeah, sure, yes. So some people actually used consumer EEG devices to paint or to play music. For example, they monitor your alpha frequencies, your beta frequencies, your SMR, like multiple frequencies. And as these frequencies change, there's a picture being painted as a result that correlates with that. Or for example, different musical instruments get played based on your alpha frequency or your beta frequency and so on. So it creates this like harmonious symphony, right? Yeah, just it's an example, right? It's not a, yeah. Anyway, so what we've done, the company was founded around like 3.5 years ago, 4 years ago, just in time for that EEG revolution. And we used the Muse device actually in the beginning to develop a clinical system to help mental health clinicians provide home-based neurofeedback. Because until now, for a mental health professional to start getting into neurofeedback, they needed to pay between $10,000 to $20,000, just the entry price to purchase the equipment, put it in the clinic, and to get through the course. Now we've done it in a much more affordable way, with the goal of spreading neurofeedback among hundreds and thousands of clinics worldwide and make it more accessible. Anyway, so what we've done basically, we said, okay, let's just put it in as many clinics as possible, increase the credibility of the company, and we've successfully done so. Among the investors of the company, you can find hospitals. We invested in the company and we're running clinical trials because first we wanted to get enough credibility and to show that there's a scientific base to whatever we're doing, like training people's pace from home. And now, as the company matures, now we're actually starting to shift more into the home training model or consumer model. However, under the supervision of a neuro coach. So, for example, at some point in the coming months, you'll be able to order your minded kit home. You'll be able to train while the neuro coach is remotely supervising the whole training experience, specifying what frequencies to be targeted in your brain, and monitoring the progress. So we look at it as kind of like the Peloton model. Are you familiar with Peloton? The bikes. Anyway, it's crazy in America. It's taken off there, but basically what they're doing is they said, okay, now you have these bikes that you use at the gym. How do you call it? Yeah, these. That if you bring one home, you put it, in your living room. It's gonna collect dust. It's useless, right? The reason is because you don't have that sense of community, you don't have that sense of accountability that you need to do it every day and so on. Seen it firsthand. Never used it. Anyway, so there's a company called Peloton, but they've done. They're a unicorn right now. That's what they've done is they said, okay, let's rebuild, let's reimagine this spinning device and make it first of all connected, and secondly build a whole community around it, and in addition to that, allow people to tap into a personal training session while they're doing their training, right? So you immediately get the access to a coach and so on, all done remotely. Anyway, long story short, as people right now are able to train and take care of their physical fitness while being supervised by professionals, we also want to allow people to take care of their mental fitness and brain fitness while also being supervised by professionals. That's basically the mission of the company. And then I'll take the stage to say that we're hiring tons of people, so if you know people, let me know. They can use the company. These are the positions we're hiring for. I'm sorry, Miri, for doing this.
That's okay.
But
we wish you much success and growth.
What is it?
We wish you a lot of success and growth.